Hello and via live. Welcome to the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur Show. And I know you all know what I'm gonna say. I say it every episode. We have a really, really special guest today. I had this list of top 100, and he made me chase him for 4 months, but we finally have him. But before we get to know who he is, we start with that. Hello, and we are back. My name is Christian Fischer. I'm the host of the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur Show, and I'm joined by a very, very special guy. And you guys hear me say this all the time that, everybody of my guests is really special. But what makes this guy very unique is not just the background he has and what he does for work, is the way he looks at food and food overall. He specializes in sensory. He does work for people for all over the world. He's not just extremely good in what he does. He's a good friend of mine, and he's just, besides being Italian, he's just a really, really nice guy. So with that, I want to welcome Riccardo. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Christian, for having me. I'm excited to be on the Disruptive Chef Show. As you mentioned, I'm not a chef, and that makes me really feel special to be on this show with you today.
No, I'm really excited to have you. And I want to get our listeners to get to learn a little bit about the AT4H, what that is, what you guys do in your consulting and the mission you have, and then a little bit how you came about doing food sensory, which I think is just a whole new level of looking at food. And I had the opportunity to work with you and know you for over a year now. And every time I do something new, Riccardo comes in my mind. And I was like, how would he look at this from a sensory point of view? Because it's so critical to do it. And it's not just critical, it's a totally different way of looking at food. So with that, talk to us a little bit about AT4H and a little bit how you got into sensory.
Sure. Thank you so much. So AT4H, actually, T4H stands for Taste for Health. And it kind of encompasses a bit about my professional career in food and in sensory, as you mentioned. So at T4H, we are a group of food and ingredient innovation consultants, and we help companies with product development, some business development as well, and especially understanding how to integrate different ingredients to provide the consumers ultimately with a pleasurable experience when it comes to taste, obviously. So that's what T4H has. We have clients in the ingredient industry, in the brand, even in the agri-tech and growing food brands as well. So we are working with all sorts of clients across the agri-food supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of my background, I like to see, my professional background in food in four phases. It starts from where I grew up. You mentioned in Italy, so the inspiration of the terroir and the origin. I grew up in a wine-producing region in the northeast of Italy, Valpolicella, so close to Verona. Then I've always been excited by everything that is sensory perception, from the colors, the sounds, the taste and smell of food, of course. So that experience of multisensory that every human being is undergoing when exposed to food. So I wanted to study a bit more about the biology. So how is our taste and olfaction system work? Why do we perceive the way we do? So understanding from mouth to brain what different ingredients and different dishes are eliciting in terms of brain responses. So I did that kind of a background in neurobiology and taste and flavor. Then I went to work in a company, an ingredient company, to understand how I could apply that knowledge to develop products, to discover new ingredients, to evaluate sensory aspects and sensory profiles of different ingredients. So I went to work in the innovation department of a flavor company, one of the biggest flavor companies in the world. And then from there, I started saying, okay, I want to help smaller companies bringing more sustainable, healthier, but still tasty ingredients into the market. And that's where T4H was born about 10 years ago. And we worked with ingredient company, we worked with technology companies, for example, in understanding how to monitor traceability and the origin of the ingredients from the farm and the way they are processed all the way to the chef's plate, to your plate. So that's a long introduction about what brought me to sensory. And every time we have a project, my angle is always looking at how a consumer would perceive it, because ultimately there's a lot of technologies out there, but sometimes when we fail and where we fail is when we forget about the human dimension and forget about that connection that humans have with food.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. And I'm so fascinated with the whole sensory side and the way you look at food. And for chefs, again, there's very few chefs, or I know of actually, which looking around sensory. So if you're talking about sensory overall, and just looking, is that more from an ingredient innovation side? Is it reducing sugar, salt, or fat, or is it a challenge you face in maybe in creating a new product? So how do you look at sensory when you create a new product?
That's a great question. And let me step back by just mentioning very quickly how flavor perception works, because this is the toolkit that then, and I work with chef in collaboration with chef. There are a few of them out there, and you are definitely one of them, that are looking at understanding how ingredients can be combined to create one plus one equal three when it comes to sensory perception. So, on the one side, you have the different systems: taste in the mouth and the tongue, olfaction, so the nose. And by the way, olfaction is responsible for 80% of the entire flavor perception. Then you have in certain application, you have also sound that comes into mind. So imagine the crunchiness of a potato crisp. You have texture, and texture is not taste and flavor. It's something, again, physiologically separate. But when you look at flavor perception, texture is one of the biggest elements. So you need to work on that as well. You also have to work on the visual aspects of food, because there's a lot of evidence that colors, presentation, I might show something to you later on that shows how visual aspect is influencing the way you like, but even the way you perceive a certain food. Sweetness, saltiness changes with the different colors, even if the composition is the same. So that is the whole part of sensory. Now, sensory systems are interacting with what I call the affective of cognitive system. So when you create a product, it might be perfect on a sensory standpoint, but then you've got other factors that chefs can't always control when it comes to liking of a product, like some genetic factors, some age-related factors, some metabolic-related factor. Are we experiencing that product when we are sated, when we are full, or when we are hungry? This changes completely the perception, even of chocolate, that might be disgusting after we have a very full meal. So, and then context and expectation. And for expectation, I thought today, I was thinking about the podcast, and I said, okay, I want to show you this. So what do you see here? What would you say this is?
It's ice cream in a cup.
Great guess. Yes. So now I'm telling you, this is an experiment. So two group of people were presented exactly with this. One group of people were told this is an ice cream.
Yep.
The other group of people were told this is a savory mousse. So The reality is that the picture I showed you is a salmon savory mousse, so it's a fishy. So the people that were told this was an ice cream rated it 1.5 on a scale of 10 in terms of liking.
Yeah.
The people that were said that they were told this is a savory mousse rated this 7.5
I
in
love
scale
that.
of 10. So you see that this doesn't have to do with the senses. It has to do with the expectation. And why do I tell you this? Because you and I also worked a lot on the plant-based product, and there is apart from the technologies and the interaction of ingredients, which is fundamental to create that sensory profile. One of the things that some of the plant-based meat alternative, didn't consider that much is really the expectation of the consumer. So if you push for a 100% mimicry versus the reference, which is, let's say, your beef burger that you're used to, and you push that with a consumer that is fond of that taste of meat, what you risk in terms of promotion is that you create a mis-expectation. So you buy it once, but that mis-expectation then will not let you buy it twice, because that is a very strong memory and negative memory that the consumer forms.
Love that.
So that's the way,
It's absolutely. I'm so fascinated, and you kind of brought in, alternative proteins and fats, and you and I worked with a really amazing company out of Spain, which I think just has a product which is absolutely amazing, and they're a little bit ahead of the industry. But in your opinion, alternative proteins and fats, they certainly gain a lot of attention in the food industry. Could you explain to us a little bit how these, alternatives have been developed, and how do they make a sustainable option, for an example?
Yes. So I'm really fond of innovation in ingredients, especially, and there are several technologies out there that can produce an ingredient that is very similar to, let's say, the taste of the animal counterpart, and uses much less resources. So the sustainability part of it, and there are companies that are evaluating also the sustainability of a formula of a product with different ingredients. And I love that part, that data applied to product development. But when it comes to sustainability, we always need to look at a life cycle analysis and a large scale. So there are emerging technologies like cultivated beef or cultivated proteins, where you recreate the real protein or the real fat from cultured cells that are coming from the animal source, but that are grown in the lab. This is very early stage. We don't know the impact at scale. We know that it might have a lower sustainability impact in terms of water usage, energy, and gas emissions, which are the three environmental factors that are taken into account. But still, even on the energy side, the amount of energy of the bioreactor, when they scale, it's something that needs to be checked.
I
So
love that.
that's
Yeah, no, that's a really good explanation. And so if they develop those products, sustainable food solutions,
yes.
let's call it that, what role does consumer preferences play in driving innovation around those sustainable food solutions?
The role is a incredibly important role. The industry, in my opinion, has not yet recognized how important the understanding how consumer can change behavior is when you develop new solution. Historically, and I'm talking about the last 10 to 15 years, these new innovation have been funded by venture capitals, because they've been exposed to, okay, this is a new technology. No, we are getting into the food tech space. And okay, the financials are, I'm gonna address the 1.6 trillion market of meat. So even a 0.1% is a gigantic leap forward for an investor.
Yep.
The problem there is that the total addressable market is not the $1 trillion meat market. The consumers need to be understood when they are trying to change their behavior towards more sustainable brands. And what has been now debunked is that the majority of consumers are not choosing yet on sustainability, on how good it is for the planet. The first two elements, and I've worked even with alternative proteins on that, are: is it going to be tasty? So taste is fundamental. Am I going to like it? And what does it do to my health?
Yeah.
So those are the two, I want to say, individualistic drivers of consumers. Now, when it comes to designing a product with these alternative ingredients, we need to embrace the complex journey of consumer food choices. And by that, I mean the product developers and the companies need to be aware of the different drivers: taste, nutrition, obviously price, convenience. Sustainability comes after those. There is also a starting framework. There are sociocultural factors in terms of religious beliefs, or label factors. Consumers might not want to use GMOs and other some label constraints, for example. So the product developers need to play with those constraints. We need to look at the drivers, and then need to go back to the drawing board and use those ingredients in a way that meet the most important consumer drivers.
I love that, and it's so true. And looking at from that point of view, the consumer is in the driver's seat. That's really what it is. And I think that whole industry moved so fast. Now the consumer has to catch up, because there was just so many amazing advances over the last few months. I find this super fascinating. And if people just logging in to this show, my name is Christian Fischer. I'm the host of the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur show. I have Riccardo with me, and he's our special guest today. And the way he looks at food, with his background around sensory being the driver of that, it's just an amazing conversation. And if you haven't done so, please like the episode. If you feel like you need to share this with somebody else, please do so. Share it with your friends and with your family, and kind of save it for yourself if you want to re-listen to the beginning. But looking overall what you do, so looking ahead over the next 3 to 5 years, what emerging technologies and trends do you believe are the most significant from a impact wise in the food industry?
So, I mean, fortunately, I mean, the food industry has been usually, I would say, pretty traditional. It's not an incredibly innovative industry. But in the last, because there's a lot of traditions, there's a lot of, our relationship with food is something that is entrenched in our culture. And we can see also some backlash of local politicians in certain countries where new technologies are coming, because they want to protect, the traditional agriculture system, the traditional way we made food. So overall, the changes, technology kind of catched up, but regulations and politics are lagging behind, I want to say. What I see in terms of most promising, certainly the whole area of fermentation, from biomass fermentation to precision fermentation, to produce ingredients that will be then not magic bullets, but will be really making the difference in food formulation. That I think is going to be with scale up starting to be solved in terms of capacity. This is going to be one of the major area I would look for, the
Yep.
fermentation part. Cultivated ingredients, so cultured cells for fat and protein, is also promising, but I see still a lot of question marks in terms of supply chain.
Yep.
And affordability at scale. So it's nice to have it in a 3 stars Michelin restaurant in Singapore or here in the US, but it's different to then scale up to the mass market. And I'd say what I really am fond of. I spent 4 years in a startup looking at the traceability software to monitor the path of ingredients from farm to fork. I see a lot of new technologies applied to agriculture, to the fields, from satellite sensing that will really make an impact in monitoring, for example, the GHG emissions of different types of soils, to sensors in the soil. So everything that is applied now to agriculture, including making more resilient roots to sequester carbon, I see in this agtech space major innovation that will be super important when it comes to facing the challenges of climate change, because that's where it starts.
Yeah, I love that. So what are then some of the common misconceptions about sustainability in the food production that you encounter out there in the marketplace?
I had a recent chat with a VC that is only investing in companies that are not touching the animal derived ingredient sector.
Wow.
And one of the misconceptions that I think people have when it comes to sustainability is to consider only the environmental part of it. So sustainability obviously is about health of the planet, but it's also about making sure that there is that the food reaches the right people. So there's a part of social sustainability and financial sustainability that is how we can combat the issues of over and malnutrition. That is also sustainability in my definition, because it's part of the social sustainability. So that first misconception is this one, and then the second is drawing already conclusions on everything that is not animal agriculture is more sustainable. Sometimes this is not true. It depends on how agriculture is made. Obviously, if we talk about intensive agriculture, especially in a country like the US with big lands and with monocrops, that is unsustainable. But if we come back to do agriculture in a different way with regenerative practices, then some part of, I think, balance between animal protein and plant-based proteins is part of a sustainable food system. And as a matter of fact, I think one of the major publications released in the last 2 years was the Eat Lancet study that showed how environmental sustainability and health and nutrition can go together. Sometimes they don't, depending on certain environment. So much so that the first article had to be amended with some recommendation to increase some animal protein consumption in certain areas of the world, because there were some specific deficiencies that plant-based could not address. So
yeah,
that's...
I absolutely love that. First off, I love the way you look at food. I love the way you look at the whole supply chain as a whole. And I I hope the listeners understand how groundbreaking the work you do in the industry is, and how you look at it, and how us from a culinary side need to have a little bit more Ricardo within us, because I think that's where it really starts. And now I hope the listeners understand why I said this guy's amazing, not just in what he does from an industry, it's just the way he looks at it. And for me, I can talk to you forever. So shifting gears a little bit for chefs. So as an inspiring entrepreneur chef who wants to make a difference in the food system, so from a sustainability side, what advice would you give him to start?
So to chefs, okay.
Yep.
So obviously, first of all, I think the most important advice that I try to use in every project is that if you look at if you look at our food system, there are big challenges in health and nutrition, in supply, with waste, for example, in emission, even in fraud. So those big challenges are currently unmet when it comes to product creation, because a lot of the products that we are doing fail on the marketplace.
Yep.
So I think that the first part is for chefs, for people like ingredient innovator like myself, for food scientists, the first order of work is collaboration. We cannot create new products if we do not collaborate, and this means different disciplines. So the culinary expertise needs to come together with the sensory expert and the food scientist, as well as with anthropologists that understand human behavior, to create a human-centric product at the end, and prototyping. We had this exchange also within one of the projects I'm involved with in Timus, for example, and creating a test kitchen and a physical location where products are made with knowledge of their sensory perception, knowledge of their sustainability impact, and we can get some data on that, knowledge of their food science, so how this will change with processing condition, and the chef that creates at the end the formulation. These need to come together at a service of those companies that cannot be only the big food companies. It needs to be affordable enough and scalable enough to be a service for small and medium enterprises that are innovating, that cannot allow to have as a full-time employee a Christian, a Riccardo, and and anthropologists and food scientists all at their payroll. They need to be able to have access to these services. So I think the first advice is collaborate, be open to information coming from adjacent disciplines, because that's the way product can be created. And use data, make use of data, not only of your imagination, which is a super important creative aspect of a chef.
I just absolutely love that. So I hope every chef took notes. And if you haven't done so, kind of go back 5 minutes and listen to this again, because I think we all need a little bit of Ricardo in us. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I can talk to you forever. But before we wrap this up, I want to know if you wouldn't be in the industry today and what you do, what would you do?
If I wouldn't be in the food industry today, I would have loved to be a professional sports person, especially a tennis or a golf player. That would have I would have loved to do so. But apart from jokes, I think I really, if I had to come back, I would try and do a little more studies on the culinary aspect, because I'm a home chef, but I would love to be more creative. I'd love to have that part in me.
That's awesome. It's really good. And also, I love, I'm European. I love soccer like you. And I also seen, I don't know if you followed the news this morning, we finally making some progress in female soccer. The U.S. signed the first female soccer player today. She is getting 1.5 million as a sign up.
Oh,
So
I
we,
haven't seen that, but this is
yeah.
really welcome.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's some amazing stuff which is out there, and I
Yeah.
absolutely love to see that's happening. But to our listener, if you haven't done so, please remember, and if you haven't done so, subscribe to our Disruptive Chef Club, become part of our exclusive community. You can unlock your private Facebook page where we gonna go live in there all the time. You get community emails. You connect to other food enthusiasts just like you. So if you haven't done so, please go to the Disruptive Chef Club, our private community. So, but before we wrap up, Riccardo, by the way, I absolutely love this conversation, and I love to explore that groundbreaking work you do. And I think we need to have a 2.0 conversation.
Mhm.
Tell our listeners a little bit where they can follow you, where they can find you, and where they can learn more about the work you do.
Perfect. So obviously on my LinkedIn profile, Riccardo Accolla, you can find me on LinkedIn. I do have also a website, which is t4h-consulting.com, where you can see some of the project I've seen, I've done in the past. I'm not updating that much. I decided not to be much on social media lately.
Yep.
So LinkedIn is the best way to reach out to me, or on my email, Riccardo at t4h-consulting.com. And I'd be happy to have a chat and discuss about any aspect of food innovation and ingredients.
That is awesome. And if you haven't done so, make sure you guys check him out. We also have in the show notes how you can get a hold of Riccardo and follow the amazing work he does. And we have a little surprise. And because we are live, he has no idea, but we do, every guest gets a rapid fire
Oh my God.
question. We have
No.
10 questions, but we're going to randomly pick 3 for you. So no pressure. There's no right or wrong answer. The only thing is you might make people really upset with some of your answers. So be careful.
Let's see. Let's see. Yes.
As the Italian you are, question number 1. If you were given the power to ban one ingredient forever, what is it and why?
Oh, okay. Let me think. I will have to go with the high fructose corn syrup. I will have to go with that. When I came from Europe to the US, everything was tasting sweeter.
Yep.
And the why I would ban it is this, to me, is with the high level of fructose, is one of the biggest culprit of the metabolic diseases that are very high in terms of incidence in this country. So that's
I
the
love
ingredient.
that. But there's gonna be people a little mad because fried fructose, it's good, it's sweet, it's good. So
I know. Yeah.
if given the same power to ban one dish forever, what is that one dish and why?
That, I think, is going to upset a lot of my American friends, but as an Italian, every salad with what they call Italian dressing, I would ban it forever, because this is never an Italian dressing. So please don't use that dressing. Just olive oil and balsamic vinegar. This
Oh,
is much than enough, more than enough.
okay, now we just lost half of our listening audience, but that's really funny. We had somebody yesterday who wanted to ban parsley forever. He doesn't get parsley. Okay, and the final question is, what is a kitchen gadget which is way overrated?
Kitchen gadget that is way overrated. I think I've never used my garlic presser. I've never used that. Never used that, and I have it. The only time I used it, and this is a funny story. I was involved in a project on the Internet of Tomatoes. So how can you how can you predict how our tomato will taste based on the way it was grown from the
Yep.
farm all the way to the fork? And we had we had a bricks instrument that would measure the level of sweetness of a tomato, but
Yeah.
you needed to squish it and create the juice. That's where I took my garlic presser and I squished the cherry tomatoes with it. So that's the only time I used it.
Oh, that is culinary rape. You don't use.
I know. I destroyed those poor tomatoes, but it was important to have a
Oh,
read on the
that's the
bricks.
best. And what makes this even funnier, you're the second person this week we had a podcast on who wants to ban the garlic press because he's,
Oh.
I don't get it. I don't know what it does. Oh my God, that's too funny. So, Riccardo, we really appreciate you being here today. And for our listeners, if you haven't done so, make sure you check out Riccardo on Instagram, check out his website. The information is in the show note. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our Disruptive Chef Club, which is our private community, which is exclusive community to unlock your private Facebook group, get community emails, and connect with other food enthusiasts just like you. So with that, Riccardo, thanks for being here today. Any final words of wisdom around sensory in food?
The only thing I would say is take your time every time you eat. Take your time to look at what you're eating. Take your time to smell. Take your time to listen to what you're eating as well. Use all your senses when you're eating, because eating with mindfulness is so much better than just eating in front of your screen and do some mindless binging. So take your time and
That's great
explore your
advice.
senses.
That's really great advice. And again, we appreciate the gift of your time. Thanks for being here today. You got to promise us to come back. We need to have a conversation 2.0. Until next time, remember to disrupt your kitchen, fire up your career, stay hungry for change. I'm Christian, the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur host. A big shout out of thank you for Riccardo being here today. And to our listeners, be the change, be the challenge, and be the chef who sets the world on fire. With that, I want to say thanks for listening and thanks everybody coming on, and stay disruptive. Thanks, everybody.